The year was 1871, and the hills of Kentucky still bled from a war that had ended years before. The air hung heavy with ash and silence, like the world had forgotten how to breathe. Across the Cumberland Highlands, towns had crumbled into graves of brick and bone. Soldiers had marched through and vanished, leaving behind only smoke, widows, and questions that no one dared to ask. But there, along a narrow road that twisted through pines older than the Republic itself, another kind of darkness had taken root, one that did not march beneath banners or die for cause. It was the kind that ate quietly and smiled while doing it. The story I'm about to tell you is not written in school books. It does not belong to generals or presidents or glory. It belongs to the kind of hunger that hides behind kind eyes, to a family whose name was nearly erased until fragments of bone paper and rumor were unearthed nearly a century later. This is the story of the Barrowfields, a family who turned the ancient tradition of hospitality into something unspeakable. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The creak of a wagon wheel on wet earth, the flicker of a lantern in the dark, and the faint laughter of a man who does not know he's being welcomed to his last meal. The Cumberland Highlands were a cruel landscape, mountains rising like teeth, valleys drowned in mist, and rivers that curved through the forest like scars that refused to heal. In those years, isolation was survival. A stranger at your door could mean salvation from a storm, or a danger that walked upright and smiled. To offer food was to offer trust. To sit by another's fire was to share your soul. But as the Barrowfield story proves, trust can be the sharpest blade of all. Before we go deeper, I want you to look inward. Imagine a single light flickering through the trees. You approach, tired, hungry, and alone. You see a hand waving you closer. Would you still knock? If you can feel that chill running down your spine, right? I see the light through the trees. Twice in the comments to seal this truth within you. And before we go further, subscribe and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. The distance between us may not be as great as you think. To understand what happened at Barrowfield Hill, we must first step back into the world that made it possible. Kentucky in 1871 was a land split open, by war, by famine, by fear. The law existed mostly on paper. The men who had once worn badges now carried muskets, and the churches that had once held sermons now held silence. In the Highlands, miles from any courthouse, families learned to trust only themselves. They kept their doors barred, their voices low, and their eyes fixed on the tree line, where the line between safety and danger was as thin as fog. The war had left scars that no plow could turn under. Entire towns had emptied overnight, leaving their houses to rot. The Red Ash River, which wound like a black ribbon through the Cumberland wilderness, carried whispers of travelers who never reached the towns they promised to visit. It was a lonely world, built on suspicion, and it was in that silence that the Barrowfields found their purpose. They arrived quietly, without fanfare, sometime around 1858. A husband, Nathaniel Barrowfield, tall and gaunt, his eyes the color of frost. His wife, Agnes, pale and expressionless, always wearing black, even in the summer heat. With them came their 5 children, 3 sons, 2 daughters, and a wagon heavy with trunks that no one in the valley ever saw opened. They bought 200 acres along the Red Ash River, prime land that most families could only dream of affording. Yet no one knew where their money came from. They were strangers, and in those hills, strangers were usually poor. But the Barrowfields were not. Their homestead stood like a wound in the forest, clean, orderly, unnaturally still. The fences were perfect, the windows shuttered, the fields tended by hands that were never seen. When neighbors passed by, they said the place looked alive but empty, as if its heart had stopped but its body hadn't noticed. Those who met Nathaniel in town said he spoke little, but when he did, people listened. His coin was good, his eyes sharp, and his politeness, the kind that froze the air. And still, no one asked questions. In the Cumberland Highlands, curiosity was dangerous. Silence kept you alive, but silence can also feed monsters. The first signs came quietly. A peddler gone missing, a wagon found abandoned, footprints that led toward the Barrowfield farm and never back out again. At first, it was written off as bad luck. Then it began to happen again and again. By the spring of 1871, travelers had started whispering about the Red Ash stretch of road. They said something lived there. something that moved like a shadow between the trees, something that watched wagons roll past and followed their lanterns long after the horses slept. Locals began calling that place the Hollow Mile. No one ever said the Barrowfield's name aloud, but everyone knew. Those who passed by their property spoke of strange smells drifting on the wind at night, sweet and metallic, like iron left to rust in sugar water. Others claimed to hear the clatter of pans and voices after midnight, though the Barrowfield's windows stayed dark. On some mornings, neighbors found the creek that ran from their land streaked with a thin film of red. They told themselves it was animal blood from butchering, even though no one ever saw livestock leave the Barrowfield farm. It was the disappearances that began to turn rumor into dread. The first was a traveling tinker named Elias Darnell, known for fixing watches and wagon wheels. He was last seen heading toward the Barrowfield homestead, a storm gathering behind him. A week later, his mule was found grazing along the Red Ash River, still tied to its post. His tools, his cart, even his boots gone. Then came Martha Lay, a young woman who sold sewing needles and cloth door to door. Her body was never found, but her satchel washed up near the Barrowfield's property line. The sheriff came once, asked a few questions, and left just as quickly. In those days, a family like the Barrowfields, white, wealthy, God-fearing in public, was untouchable. People began taking the long road instead, even if it added half a day to their journey. But the ones who were desperate, the travelers, the poor, the wanderers without kin, they still followed the light that flickered from the Barrowfield's porch. And that light always came on when the sky turned black. One survivor, a man named Caleb Norris, claimed to have seen the inside of their home. He was found months later barefoot and wild-eyed, wandering near Pikeville. When someone asked what he'd seen, he muttered one phrase over and over until his throat went rawvy. They smiled when I prayed. He would never speak again. By then, even the wind avoided the Hollow Mile. But one cold October night, a group of bounty hunters would ride into those woods, and what they found in the cellar of the Barrowfield house would freeze Kentucky in silence for the next 100 years. It was the night of October 14, 1871, moonless, breathless, and so still that even the crickets refused to sing. A group of 4 bounty riders from Harlan County rode west toward the Red Ash River, chasing rumor more than justice. Their names were Hollis, Crane, Judah, and Merrin, men who'd seen death in every form, except the kind that smiled back. They'd heard about travelers gone missing, about wagons left empty, and about a family that never came to town except to buy salt, kerosene, and knives. By the time they reached the Barrowfield property, the world had turned to ink. The air was cold and wet with fog, so thick it swallowed their lanterns whole. The riders could barely make out the outline of the farmhouse ahead, tall, symmetrical, with a single porch light burning faintly behind its curtains. It looked less like a home and more like a stage waiting for an audience. Crane dismounted first. "Looks dead," he said, his voice trembling despite the pistol on his hip. Judah spat into the dirt. "Then let's wake the dead." They tethered their horses by the fence and approached on foot. The porch boards groaned beneath their boots. Hollis, the oldest and quietest, raised his hand to knock, but before his knuckles touched the wood, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, a soft golden light spilled out, warm, inviting. "Wrong, evening," came a voice from within. It was Nathaniel Barrowfield, tall and pale as candle wax, his face drawn into a polite half-smile. Behind him stood his wife Agnes, hands folded, eyes black and bottomless. On the table behind them sat a supper already served, 5 plates, steaming, waiting. "We weren't expecting guests," Nathaniel said calmly, "but Providence must have sent you. Please come in from the chill." The riders looked at one another. Merrin whispered, 5 plates. Hollis nodded once. "Were 4. Barrowfield smiled wider. "I know." Still, they entered. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cooked meat and herbs, sweet, unfamiliar, and heavy. The room was spotless, too spotless. Every wall gleamed as though scrubbed with ash and lye. Yet beneath that brightness lurked a smell they couldn't name, like smoke that came from something that once had a name. As they sat, Agnes bowed her head and began to pray. Her voice trembled, soft, rhythmic, ancient, and when she finished, Nathaniel looked up at them and said, "Eat before it gets cold." The men hesitated. Hollis reached for the fork, and then, from the cellar below, came the faint sound of chains. The sound was faint at first, just a dull rattle beneath the floorboards. But in the stillness of that room, it cut through every breath like a blade drawn slow. The 4 bounty riders froze. Forks hovered mid-air. The Barrowfields didn't flinch. Nathaniel kept smiling, as though the noise were nothing more than the house settling. "Old foundation," he said softly, folding his hands. "She creaks when the weather turns cold." But Hollis, the oldest of the riders, had fought through too many winters to mistake the sound of wood for iron. He looked down at the floor, his jaw tightening. The noise came again, metal scraping against stone, followed by something that might have been a voice. Judah set his glass down slowly. "Ain't no wind making that sound," he whispered. Agnes's head snapped toward him, her calm unraveling for just a second. Then she smiled again, slow and deliberate. "Sometimes," she said, "the Lord tests us with what we hear." Crane pushed his chair back. "Then maybe he's testing me to lift this floor." Nathaniel rose. Too quickly. "I must insist," he said, his tone still polite but cold now, like water over steel. "This is our home. You are guests. Sit." But Merrin was already moving. He stepped around the table and knelt near the corner where the sound was loudest. The boards there were stained darker than the rest, the nails fresher. His fingers brushed the seams and came away sticky. He looked up, his face turning white. "This ain't weather, Hollis. It's blood." Before anyone could react, Nathaniel moved. His hand shot across the table, knocking over a lantern. The room erupted in light and shadow, the fire catching along the oil trail that streaked the floorboards. Hollis drew his revolver. Crane kicked the chair back. Agnes screamed, a sound not human but sharp, shrill, and layered, like a chorus of voices crying through her throat. Judah fired once, glass shattered. Smoke filled the air. In that chaos, Merrin's boot struck a loose plank. It cracked open. Beneath it, darkness. The smell that burst out was thick, rancid, and sweet enough to choke on. Hollis dropped to one knee and shone his lantern through the gap. What the light touched made him stagger back. There were faces down there, dozens, white, grey, and still, some whole, some not. And in the center, chained to the wall, sat a man barely alive, his lips moving, whispering one word over and over, "Run." Hollis didn't need to be told twice. He turned toward the door, but Nathaniel Barrowfield was standing in front of it now. And he wasn't smiling anymore. The lantern light threw shadows across the walls, twisting them into something alive. Smoke rose, curling around the rafters like black fingers. Hollis raised his gun, his voice raw. "Step aside, Barrowfield." Nathaniel didn't move. His face was calm, but his eyes, they gleamed like wet coal. Behind him, Agnes stood motionless, her hands clasped as if in prayer. The flames began to lick the edges of the curtains, hissing as they found oil and cloth. Crane backed toward the window. "We need to get out. Now." But Nathaniel's voice came low, steady, like a preacher before a funeral. "You think you found evil here, but we only did what God no longer had the stomach to do." "What the hell does that mean?" Judah barked. Nathaniel tilted his head, eyes reflecting firelight. "He took the world's hunger away, left it to rot in men like us. Someone had to keep it fed." Then, from beneath the floor, a muffled cry rose, hoarse pleading, the chained man. The sound broke whatever spell held them still. Hollis fired. The bullet struck Nathaniel square in the chest. He stumbled but didn't fall. For one terrible heartbeat, it was as if the shot hadn't mattered at all. Then blood welled dark across his shirt. Agnes lunged, not toward her husband, but at Hollis. She moved with an animal strength, knocking him back into the table. Dishes shattered. Merrin grabbed her from behind, dragging her off, but she clawed at his face, screaming words that weren't English. Just noise and breath and hate. The fire was spreading fast now. Smoke poured through the rafters, filling their lungs with heat and ash. Hollis coughed hard, eyes watering.
"Get the trap open."
Crane and Judah ripped up the boards where the chain had rattled. Beneath them lay a hole barely wide enough for one man. The stench was unbearable. Beneath the flickering light, they could see other shapes, arms, bones, maybe more. "Help him?" Hollis said, pointing to the prisoner. They pulled the man up, weak and trembling. His eyes rolled white in the firelight. "They feed the hills," he rasped. "They feed it." Behind them, Agnes shrieked again, a roar, inhuman sound, and threw herself into the flames, her body catching fire like dry paper. Nathaniel staggered forward, still bleeding, still smiling. "You can't kill what's been blessed," he whispered. Then the ceiling cracked. The beam came down, the fire roared, and the Barrowfield house collapsed into itself with a sound like thunder swallowing the earth. Only 3 men and 1 half-dead stranger made it out into the night. Behind them, the farmhouse burned, the sky glowing red, as though the mountain itself had opened its mouth. And in that glow, just before the roof caved in completely, someone swore they saw 5 shadows standing in the window, perfectly still. By dawn, nothing was left of the Barrowfield home but a heap of blackened beams and ash. The air hung thick with the smell of burned flesh and wet timber. Smoke still twisted through the treetops like ghosts that refused to rise. Hollis, Crane, and Judah stood in silence, their faces grey with soot, their hands shaking as the heat finally began to fade. Merrin was gone, lost when the roof came down. The man they had dragged from the cellar lay near the riverbank, breathing shallowly, his skin blistered and pale. He hadn't spoken since they pulled him free, just stared into the forest, eyes wide and unblinking, as if watching something move that no one else could see. Hollis knelt beside him. "You're safe now," he said. "It's over." The man's lips cracked open. His voice was little more than a whisper. "No, they never die in the house. That's not where they live." Before Hollis could ask what he meant, the man went still, gone like a candle blown out by wind. Crane looked toward the smoldering ruins. "We should go back," he said. "Get the sheriff." But Judah shook his head. "Sheriff won't come here. No one will." He was right. When word finally spread, no lawman or preacher dared ride to the Hollow Mile. Too many said the land itself had turned bad, that it was cursed or hungry or both. Some nights, travelers claimed they could still see the glow of that fire deep in the trees, though the house had long since turned to dust. Others swore that if you followed the river at night, you could hear the faint clink of chains beneath the earth. A month later, when the first snowfall came, a group of loggers passing through the valley found something buried near the creek, a single iron pot, sealed tight with wax. Inside were teeth, dozens of them. Human, each carved with a small cross, and nearby, pressed into the mud, were footprints. Bare, small, as if belonging to a child. The loggers left everything where it was and never returned. Years passed. The forest swallowed the Barrowfield land hold. The road was rerotted, the name erased from maps, and the valley slowly vanished into rumor. But still hunters, drifters, and wanderers kept disappearing, always near the same place, always without trace. It was said that if you camped too close to the river and listened carefully after midnight, you could hear footsteps behind you, soft, wet, and close, and a voice whispering, gentle as prayer, "Stay for supper." It wasn't until the summer of 1936, more than 60 years after the fire, that the Barrowfields returned, though not in flesh but in words. A crew of surveyors clearing the red ash woods stumbled upon a collapsed well hidden beneath a tangle of briar and oak. Inside they found pieces of the past, fragments of porcelain, rusted tools, and a small tin box sealed in wax. Inside that box lay a single object, a leather-bound journal, its pages warped and dark with age. On the first page, written in delicate, looping script, was a name: Agnes Barrowfield. The diary was taken to the Pikeville Historical Society, where archivists began the slow, careful process of translating its fading ink. What they found was not the record of a housewife or mother. It was a confession, a scripture written in madness. The first entries spoke of ordinary things: harvests, births, weather, prayers. But slowly the tone began to twist. Agnes wrote of voices in the river, of shadows that moved when the lamps went out, and of a hunger that she claimed came from the soil itself. "The land was empty when we came," one passage read, "but it watched us as a starving man watches a table. At night, it whispers beneath the floorboards. It asks for blood so it may rest. My husband says it is the Lord testing us. I no longer know which voice is his." Another page, nearly unreadable, contained only a list of names, dozens of them. Travelers, peddlers, strangers, some marked with a cross, others with a star. Near the end, one final note was scrawled in trembling ink. "Nathaniel says the hill is full now, that the mouths below are quiet. But I hear them still. I will feed them one last time, and then I will go into the fire. The light must never go out." The historian who read those words described feeling something move in the air around him, like the room itself exhaled. 2 days later, the diary was placed in a locked cabinet for preservation. It has never been displayed publicly since. But here's the part they don't tell in the official record. One of the archivists, a woman named Mrs. Dorsey, took photographs of the diary before it was sealed away. Months later, she disappeared on a drive home from Pikeville. Her car was found beside the Red Ash River, door open, engine running. The only trace of her was a single photograph floating in the shallows, the page where Agnes had written, "The light must never go out." Locals still whisper about the Red Ash River, the way it bends unnaturally near the old Barrowfield land, how its current slows there, as though something beneath it is pulling against the flow. They say the fish won't bite, the birds won't land, and even in summer the water stays as cold as winter bone. On foggy mornings it almost looks alive, breathing, having, remembering. For decades, strange things have happened along that stretch of river. Cattle vanish without a trace, only for their hides to wash up miles downstream. Campfires go cold overnight, their ashes soaked though no rain has fallen, and sometimes travelers report the sound of a dinner bell echoing faintly through the trees. Though there hasn't been a house there for more than half a century, folks in Pike County call it the Red Ash Curse. But the elders, the ones whose grandparents still remembered the Barrowfields, they call it something else, the Hill's Hunger. Every 10 years, they say the land must eat. Not people, not animals, but memories. A child goes missing and the town forgets their name. A hunter vanishes and his family swears he never existed. The curse doesn't just take flesh, it erases the idea of it. In 1952, a local newspaper, the Harlan Gazette, ran a story about 2 men who claimed to have found a tunnel in the woods near Red Ash Creek. They said it was lined with stone, descending into the ground at a perfect angle. They only made it 20 feet before the air turned foul and they had to crawl out. One of them, a miner named Earl Petty, told the reporter he heard something inside, chains dragging slow and steady. 3 days after the article was printed, Earl was found dead in his bed. No wounds, no struggle. His face was turned toward the window, his mouth open, his eyes wide. The coroner wrote only one word on the report: fear. The newspaper retracted the story the next week. The editor claimed the article had never existed, but a surviving copy, browned with age, still circulates among locals who dare to keep it. Today, people who drive the old road say their headlights dim as they pass the mile marker where the Barrowfield property once stood. The air grows thick, radios crackle, and sometimes, if you slow down enough, you can see a faint light through the trees. A lantern swinging gently in the dark. And if you roll your window down, you might hear a voice say, "Even you look tired. Come in from the chill." By 1979, the legend of the Barrowfields had drifted into folklore, something told around campfires or whispered in dive bars to spook out of towners. But that summer, a piece of film surfaced that turned the legend into something far more tangible. It began with a group of college students from Lexington, 4 in total, driving through Pike County while working on a documentary about American ghost towns. One of them, Daniel Harker, brought along a bulky Super 8 camera. Their plan was simple: film the remains of the old mining towns, collect a few local ghost stories, and head back home. On July 12th, they reached a narrow dirt road outside Red Ash. According to a surviving tape log, they'd been told by a local mechanic about a patch of cursed ground, where no trees grew straight and the earth smelled like smoke after rain. The log entry ended with Daniel's handwriting. Could this be Barrowfield Hill? What happened over the next 2 hours has never been fully explained. The footage that was later recovered, now known online as the Lost Highway Reel, runs for exactly 11 minutes and 42 seconds. The first 3 minutes show nothing unusual. The group laughing, the car bouncing over rough terrain, the forest growing thicker around them. Then, at the 317 mark, the laughter stops. The camera jerks toward the window. In the distance, through the trees, a light flickers, soft amber swaying back and forth like a lantern in the wind. You can hear one of the students whisper, "That's a house." At 4:02, the camera pans upward. There's no house, only a clearing of dead grass and a blackened foundation. Then the sound begins faint, metallic, rhythmic, a clinking that grows louder with every second like chains dragged across stone. By 5:41, the film shakes violently. Someone shouts Daniel's name. The picture whites out. When it returns, the lens is cracked, the frame half tilted. The forest is gone. In its place, darkness. A voice barely audible whispers, "Eat before it gets cold." Then silence. The film ends at 11:42 with a final image, the camera lying on the forest floor, still recording, while a bare foot steps into frame. Daniel Harker and his 3 friends were never found. Their car was discovered 3 miles away, keys still in the ignition, headlights on. The reel was mailed anonymously to a Kentucky TV station 2 weeks later, wrapped in paper that smelled faintly of smoke. The sender's name on the envelope read only, A. Barrowfield. For nearly 15 years after the lost highway reel surfaced, no one dared venture back into the red ash woods. Locals had learned their lesson, leave the ghosts alone. But in 1994, the light returned. It started with a phone call to the Pike County Sheriff's Office just after midnight on October 13th. A truck driver named Walt Jennings, hauling timber through Route 41, reported seeing a house burning in the woods. The dispatcher reminded him there hadn't been a home there in a century. But Jennings insisted, said he could see the flames clear as day through the fog, and what's more, he'd seen a woman standing in front of it. He described her as wearing a long black dress, no shoes, and hair white as ash. Deputies were sent out, expecting nothing more than a drunk man seeing mist on the road. But when they arrived, the temperature dropped nearly 15 degrees. The forest was silent, no crickets, no frogs, not even wind. The ground was soft, scorched in patches, though no fire had burned there in decades. And then they saw it, just ahead in the darkness, a faint orange glow pulsing slowly like breath. Deputy Harlan Reed, the youngest of the group, later told his wife that it wasn't fire at all. It looked like a lantern swinging from an invisible hand. Every time they moved closer, the light drifted away, always the same distance ahead, leading them deeper into the woods. After nearly half an hour, the glow vanished. Reed raised his flashlight and caught sight of something carved into a tree trunk. The bark had been stripped clean, and burned into the wood were 3 words, THELIGHTFEDs. They radioed back to base, but the signal broke, static and whispers overlapping like faint voices underwater. One of the deputies, Morales, swore he heard a woman laughing through the interference. Then the radio went dead. When the search team returned at dawn, they found only 2 deputies waiting by the trucks. Reed was missing. His flashlight was discovered later that morning in the river mud, still on beam pointing upstream. For weeks, divers combed the red ash shallows. Nothing. Not even a boot. But here's the part that chills even the most skeptical investigator. The next night, residents miles away reported seeing that same lantern light moving through the trees again. Only this time, there were 2 lights, swaying side by side, and those who saw it said the smaller one flickered weakly, like a flame just learning to breathe. In 1996, 2 years after Deputy Reed's disappearance, a church in Pike County was undergoing renovation when workers stumbled upon something strange buried beneath the foundation. It was a sealed wooden crate, waterlogged and wrapped in rusted chain. The pastor, Father Leland Moore, described it as old enough to crumble if you breathed too hard. Inside were 3 things: a leather-bound journal, its pages warped by damp and smoke, a brass lantern, blackened but still faintly smelling of kerosene, and a small porcelain doll's head, cracked clean through the middle. The writing in the journal was faded and spidery, signed only Ruth Barrowfield. According to the date on the first page, it had been written in 1858, the final year the Barrowfield family was believed to have lived on that cursed land. What the entries described changed everything. Ruth claimed her father, Abner Barrowfield, had been a preacher who lost his faith after the death of his wife. In his grief, he began performing rituals from an old book brought to him by a traveling peddler. A book, he claimed, spoke with its own tongue. He told his daughter the light from the lantern could feed the dead what they are owed, and that once the light was strong enough, it could call souls back across the veil. Ruth's tone shifted across the final pages from fear to horror. Her handwriting shook, her ink blurred by tears. She wrote of screams in the night, of animals found gutted in the fields, of her father whispering prayers that weren't in any Bible. The last entry was dated October 21st, 1858, the same night the Barrowfield farmhouse supposedly burned to the ground. It read, "He says the light is hungry again, that it will eat and eat until it remembers her face. If I do not feed it, it will take me instead." Then, scrawled beneath in a trembling hand, "Is lighting the lantern now. Mother, forgive us." After the journal was examined by historians, it was quietly locked away by the diocese, labeled unverified occult artifact. But before that, one volunteer, an intern named Mary Collins, took photographs of several pages. 6 months later, Mary vanished from her apartment in Lexington. Police found her camera still on her desk. The last photo on the roll wasn't from the journal at all. It was a blurry image taken in the dark, showing what looked like a lantern's glow reflecting off a child's face. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m., and if you zoomed close enough, you could just make out a second face beside hers, half hidden in shadow, smiling. By 2001, the Barrowfield legend had become more than a campfire story. It was an obsession for fringe documentarians and late-night radio hosts. One of them was Eli McRae, a 34-year-old filmmaker from Ohio who had made a name for himself investigating rural hauntings. His documentary, The Hollow Ones, had earned him a cult following, and his next project, he said, would close the book on Barrowfield for good. Eli arrived in Pike County on April 2nd, 2001, accompanied by his cameraman, Sean Dooley, and a sound tech named Kim Anders. They set up camp just outside the ruins of the old Barrowfield property. According to Kim's recovered field notes, Eli had obtained a photocopy of one of the Ruth Barrowfield journal pages from an anonymous collector, the one containing the line, "If you light the lantern, you must not look away." Eli's plan was simple. He would find the lantern, light it, and film whatever happened. On April 4th, the team recorded their first night in the woods. Most of the footage was uneventful static wind, Eli joking about local ghost stories. But at 2:46 a.m., the camera caught something none of them could explain, a dim flicker of orange light far behind the tree line. Eli whispered, "That's it. The next 5 minutes are some of the most disturbing found footage ever documented." The team moves toward the glow. The camera stutters as branches snap. Sean calls out, "Eli, stop." But Eli doesn't. He walks straight into the clearing where, impossibly, a lantern sits upright on a patch of dead grass. It burns with a steady, unnatural flame, no smoke, no flicker, just a pulsing glow. Eli kneels beside it and says quietly, "If you can hear me, I'm not afraid." Kim's microphone records a sound beneath his voice, soft breathing that doesn't belong to any of them. Then a whisper, "Don't look away." Sean curses. The camera jerks toward the trees, and for a split second, something moves there. A figure half seen, with white hair that glows in the lantern's light. The footage cuts to black. 2 days later, hikers found Sean and Kim wandering the highway, barefoot, clothes torn, covered in ash. They were incoherent, muttering about the light that eats. Eli was never found. His camera was discovered weeks later, lodged in the roots of a dead oak, lens cracked, film still inside. When investigators developed the footage, the final frame was frozen mid-record. Eli's face, pale, eyes wide, and behind him, a hand resting on his shoulder, a hand too small to belong to an adult, and in the reflection of the lens, the lantern still burned. In 2012, over a decade after Eli McRae vanished, a strange audio file appeared on an online paranormal forum. The post was titled simply, "H.R. Mochet T. Foreste Say Pike County KY, no username, no description. Just a download link." Those who opened it reported a 6-minute clip labeled Barrowfield 042, while the first 90 seconds were nothing but static, low, grinding hums, like wind moving through metal pipes. Then, faintly, a woman's voice whispered something unintelligible beneath the noise. Digital forensics later confirmed the file had been recorded on reel-to-reel equipment, not a phone or modern recorder. But the most unsettling part, the voice patterns matched that of Kim Anders, Eli McRae's missing sound technician who had died in 2007. At 1934, the sound shifts. The static clears, replaced by what sounds like forest ambience. Crickets, leaves, the faint rustle of water. Then a breath, and a whisper so close to the mic it nearly distorts. "Don't follow the light, it remembers you." Several listeners claimed to hear something else layered beneath her voice. A child humming, repeating the same 4 notes over and over. When slowed down to half speed, the hum formed a clear pattern, the melody of Rocker by Baby. At 3:56, the file peaks into a surge distortion. Amid the crackling, a man's voice, low, deliberate, uncomfortably calm, speaks 5 words. One never stopped feeding it. Then silence. Spectrogram analysis of the file later revealed an image hidden in the sound wave. A faint, lantern-shaped silhouette surrounded by what appeared to be 4 smaller points of light, like eyes reflecting in the dark. Experts dismissed it as pareidolia, humans finding patterns in noise. But those who examined the metadata found something far harder to explain. The file's creation date read October 21, 1858, a date impossible for a digital file to bear. Within 48 hours, the post and account were deleted, but copies spread across Reddit, dark web archives, and YouTube horror channels. Users who listened claimed strange effects afterward, lights flickering in their homes, voices in their headphones, whispers calling their name. A week later, a Reddit user named Pinefield Ghost posted a final comment under one of the uploads. "The lantern isn't buried. It's waiting for someone to light it again." That comment was timestamped 3:17 a.m., the same time recorded on Mary Collins' last photograph. The account was deleted 3 minutes later, and according to Reddit's logs, someone or something tried to reactivate it 9 years later, from an IP address in Pike County. By 2023, the Barrowfield legend had faded from mainstream attention, buried under layers of internet myth and forgotten folklore. But one stormy night in October, it came back. At exactly 3:17 a.m., that number again, a call came into Pike County Emergency Services from a teenage girl named Amber Ray who lived near the old Red Ash property line. Her voice was shaking as she told the dispatcher, "There's someone in the woods. They're carrying a light." Deputies arrived 20 minutes later to find the girl standing barefoot in her front yard, soaked to the bone, clutching a kitchen knife. Her parents were gone. The back door of the house was wide open. Muddy footprints, bare, small, led from the yard into the kitchen, stopping beside the sink. The deputies followed them outside into the woods. The rain had stopped and a thick fog clung low to the ground. Then they saw it, a lantern glowing dimly in the mist, swinging side to side. No one was holding it. Bodycam footage from that night, released unofficially 2 months later, shows one of the deputies whispering, "What the hell is that?" as the light moves toward them. Static distorts the video, then clears just long enough to capture something impossible, the faint outline of a woman's figure, tall, hair pale, and drifting like smoke. She stops, the lantern stills, and though her face is never fully visible, one detail can be made out clearly. She's holding the hand of a child. The next frame cuts to black. The deputies were found hours later at sunrise, alive but disoriented and unable to recall what happened after that moment. The girl's parents, however, were never found. The only clue was discovered in the forest clearings, an old porcelain doll's head, cracked straight through the middle, lying beside a recently extinguished lantern. The case was quietly closed, labeled "Unexplained Disappearance, Probable Runaway." But online sleuths noticed something strange in the leaked bodycam footage at the final timestamp. Just before the blackout, the lantern's flame flickers. And for one frame, only one, it glows not orange but blue. Experts later explained that blue flame means higher heat, or in folklore, a soul that has finished consuming its offering. A month later, reports began surfacing of travelers driving through Route 41, seeing 2 lights deep in the trees, moving in perfect rhythm, a father's lantern and a smaller one walking beside it. On the night of October 14, 2025, just 6 days before the anniversary of the Barrowfield fire, something happened on local radio that should have been impossible. At 3:17 a.m., listeners of a WZPQ 1019 FM, a Pike County country station, reported that their usual late-night program cut to silence mid-song. For approximately 11 minutes and 42 seconds, the exact length of the Lost Highway reel, the station broadcast a transmission no one could trace. It began with a low hum, steady and mechanical, followed by faint static and the sound of crackling fire. Then, through the hiss, a woman's voice, soft, measured and eerily calm, spoke. "You shouldn't have lit it again." The voice was unmistakably Mary Collins, the intern who vanished in 1996. Speech pattern analysis confirmed a 98% vocal match, but there was no logical explanation for how that voice could have been on air in 2025. Listeners described hearing faint movement in the background, footsteps in leaves, something metallic swaying, then a child's laugh. A man's whisper overlapped, repeating the same line over and over. We kept feeding it. We kept feeding it. At 7 minutes, 03 seconds, the broadcast shifted. The crackle of fire became clearer and a rhythmic clinking began, like chains dragging over stone. Then came a distinct voice, male, distorted by static but still recognizable. This is Ely McRae. If anyone finds this tape, don't come here. Don't follow the light. It's not calling you. It's remembering you. Seconds later, screams erupted. Dozens of overlapping voices, some male, some female, some sounding almost childlike. And then, the sound cut to a single lantern hiss, like kerosene catching flame. The broadcast ended abruptly. WZPQ's systems went offline for 4 minutes. When the signal returned, the scheduled music resumed mid-song as if nothing had happened. The FCC traced the origin of the signal to a relay tower off Route 41, just 3 miles from the old Barrowfield site. But that tower had been decommissioned since 1983. 2 engineers were sent to inspect it later that week. Both men quit their jobs within 24 hours, refusing to say why. One of them left a note on his supervisor's desk that read, "It's not a frequency, it's a door," and the time scribbled beneath it, 3:17 a.m. by October 20th, 2025. The Barrowfield story was no longer just legend. It had crossed into something else. Something alive. In the days following the radio transmission, reports began flooding in from across Pike, Floyd, and Letcher counties. Dozens of people claimed to have seen the light, a slow-moving, golden glow that appeared just beyond the tree line, always at the edge of vision, never close enough to touch. At first, authorities dismissed it as mass hysteria. But then came the recordings. A hiker named Caleb Morris uploaded a 32-second clip to TikTok that night. In it, he's laughing, joking about hunting ghosts, when his flashlight beam catches something faintly glowing in the distance. He whispers, "What the hell is that?" The camera zooms in, the glow intensifies, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then, from the woods, a voice answers softly, "Come feed the light." The video ends there. Caleb's account was deleted 2 hours later. His phone, however, was found near the Red Ash River, screen still recording, pointed at the water. When investigators reviewed the footage, they found a reflection, not Caleb's, a woman with white hair standing just behind him, smiling faintly in the ripples. By dawn, Route 41 was sealed off. State police called it a hazard investigation. Locals knew better. The light had returned to where it started. That evening, drones flown over the area captured something chilling. A perfect spiral burned into the treetops, like the canopy itself had been seared from above. At its center was a single visible glow, flickering weakly. And then, just as the feed was about to cut, a second, smaller light appeared beside it. Satellite telemetry later showed that both sources moved, slowly weaving through the forest in synchrony, as if walking hand in hand. A week later, the first responders who'd entered Red Ash to recover Caleb's remains began reporting strange symptoms. Nosebleeds, insomnia, hallucinations of a woman calling from the trees. One deputy claimed his bedside lamp flickered every night at 3:17 a.m. sharp. When investigators returned to search the woods again, they found the spiral gone, replaced by a single blackened circle of earth. In its center lay a lantern, melted almost entirely to glass, but still faintly warm, and just beside it, burned into the soil like a shadow, were the prints of 2 bare feet, one large, one small. That night, the power grid across Pike County briefly flickered. Cameras along Route 41 caught a dim glow passing across the asphalt before vanishing into the trees. Locals still say that if you drive that road past midnight, with your headlights off, you'll see it too, a soft, golden light swaying through the pines, always ahead, always moving. And if you dare to call out VU, it stops too. On October 21st, 2025, exactly 167 years after the Barrowfield farmhouse supposedly burned to ash, Pike County fell silent. Power went out across 3 towns. Cell service dropped. Emergency lines buzzed dead. At 3:17 a.m., the outage map lit up in the shape of a ring, centered precisely over the old Barrowfield property. Satellite imagery later revealed something the human eye couldn't see: the forest canopy glowing faintly amber, as if lit from beneath the soil. When dawn broke, the light was gone. But the trees were blackened in a perfect circle almost half a mile wide, the ground beneath still warm to the touch. And buried at its center, beneath 6 inches of soot and stone, investigators found something impossible: a foundation. It matched the floor plan of the Barrowfield farmhouse. Every beam, every hearth, perfectly intact. But there was no sign of collapse, no burn damage. The structure wasn't charred. It was new. Carbon dating confirmed it. The wood was less than 6 months old. So how could a house that burned in 1858 stand again in 2025? Forensic teams unearthed remnants of a staircase leading into the basement. At the bottom was a single wooden crate, sealed by rusted chain, identical to the one found beneath the church floor in 1996. Inside lay another lantern. Unlike the others, this one had never been lit, but the wick was blackened, and on its base, scratched in uneven letters, were 4 words: "She's still waiting to eat." That afternoon, as crews prepared to move the artifact, one of the workers, a man named Tom Harris, vanished. His body cam, still recording, captured the moment just before he disappeared, a faint light igniting in the reflection of the lantern's glass. Then a voice, young, trembling, familiar, whispered, "Don't look away." The feed cut to black. The site has since been quarantined by the state, fenced off under the label Environmental Hazard Zone 14B. But locals know what it really is. They've seen the glow behind the trees at night, felt the hum in the ground beneath their feet. And every year as October 21st approaches, the same thing happens without fail. Phones glitch, lights flicker, clocks freeze, all at 3:17 a.m. Because the truth is this: Barrowfield never burned. It just went quiet, waiting for someone to light the lantern again. Camera fades in on a dark Kentucky forest. The mist moves like breath. The faint echo of a child humming drifts through the static. Narrator low, measured. They say every story leaves an echo, but some stories never stop talking. The lens pans slowly toward the tree line, where faint amber light pulses like a heartbeat. For more than a century, the Barrowfield name has been buried beneath ash and rumor. Yet every few decades, something stirs. A voice on a tape, a light in the trees, a whisper over the radio. Always the same time, always the same place. Cut to grainy footage, a lantern's reflection in a cracked camera lens. A child's shadow moves behind it. You can burn the house, you can silence the tapes, you can bury the dead, but you can't starve the light. The sound deepens. The same metallic rhythm from the 1979 reel. Somewhere far away, a woman's voice murmurs, "Eat before it gets cold." The narrator's voice grows softer, almost reverent. Maybe it isn't haunting us at all. Maybe it's remembering what we owe it. A promise left unfinished. A hunger left unfed. Camera zooms closer to the glow, flickering stronger now. So if you ever find yourself driving down Route 41 after midnight, and you see a light swaying through the pines, don't stop. Don't call out. And whatever you do, how the screen cuts to blackie. Don't look away. Static floods the speakers. Then, faintly, a child laughs, and the lantern ignites once more. Temix to Ascar Barrowfield, Kentucky. Last known sighting October 25, 3225, 3:17 a.m. Case status unresolved. Fade to black. The hum continues long after the credits roll. The screen fades from black. A low hum vibrates underneath a single image, an old, cracked photograph of the Barrowfield farmhouse foundation, smoke curling faintly from the soil. Now Ratu A's quiet final. Every generation thinks it's the last to hear the Barrowfield story. And every generation is wrong. A slow montage plays, each image flickering like it's struggling to exist. The lost Super 8 footage from 1979, the charred journal of Ruth Barrowfield, Ely McRae's cracked camera lens, frozen mid-scream, the radio spectrogram that shaped itself into a lantern, the map of Pike County marked by circles of light. Each artifact fades out, leaving behind only a faint orange glow. From the ashes of a farmhouse that shouldn't exist, to a voice broadcast through a dead tower, to a girl's whispered warning in the static, the pattern never ends. The circle closes, then opens again. The hum deepens. The lantern's outline becomes visible, soft, pulsing. We keep trying to explain it away. Radiation, sound bleed, trauma hoax. But what if Barrowfield isn't haunting us? What if it's remembering itself through us? Static crawls up the screen, distorting the image until it flickers like flame. And maybe the light never wanted to be evil. Maybe it only wanted to be seen. A faint child's voice interrupts, whispering just loud enough to be heard. It's cold again. Then silence. The final text fades in. Letter by letter, Archival Nuti recovered footage, documents and recordings associated with the Barrowfield phenomenon have been placed under sealed state investigation, restricted until October 25, 2083. Unauthorized access is prohibited. The lantern flickers one last time, now blue. The hum fades into nothing. Hunte EESKR in Barrowfield never burned. It just waited.